Hello there, I'm Ross Cheesewright from Japanese Knotweed Ltd, and joining me today is Daniel Docking, the technical manager from the Property Care Association. Thank you for joining me today, Daniel. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, very well. Like most people, I'm either wilting or enjoying the summer heat. But yeah, I've got some burning questions for you today. It's very easy, I think, for a consumer or a business to sort of visit a website and be, bombarded with all these accreditations and things like that. And obviously, I don't think people realize often how kind of critical these accreditations are, and what they can mean when you're sort of picking somebody to work with. So I wanted to dive a little bit more into what the Property Care Association does and what your role is there, so people can gain a better understanding of these accreditations and why they matter. They're not just there to to show people like, oh, here's another little bell or another little whistle, but they actually have some weight. Um, so I was hoping that we could ask if you could just briefly tell me what it is that the PCA does and what your role is as technical manager.
Yeah, so the Property Care Association, or sort of PCA as we call it, we are one of the UK's leading trade associations for professionals involved in a variety of different sectors. They cover structural waterproofing, timber, damp control, ground gas, flood preservation, and of course, invasive non-native plants. So I am the technical manager specializing in invasive non-native plants. However, I am sort of going through a learning process myself, and I am going to be expanding out into the timber and damp section. So kind of a little bit about what we do is we sort of audit our members. We make sure that kind of they are sort of operating to a high standard. But we actually collaborate a lot with other trade bodies, other associations, including the Amenity Forum. We also engage with government stakeholders. So, for example, DEFRA, the Non-Native Species Secretariat, to try and help raise awareness, influence policies, and kind of support national strategies. So I myself and sort of Sarah, who's the CEO, we are active participants in consultations and technical working groups. This really sort of ensures that our members, instead of everything which we do, are aligned with sort of the evolving regulations and best practice.
Yeah, and so that covers a lot, and I can see that the organization has weight in what it does in ensuring those kind of standards and having those relationships with other bodies. Um, but when it comes down to the customer, um, how do those kind of those things that you do, how does that benefit the customer? How does that sort of translate for them?
But I think probably one of the most important things is accountability. So when you are looking for a PCA member, they are held accountable to work they do, whether it's a standard, which we produce with our code of practices, or whether it's a ethical standard, which all our contractors are bound by our code of ethics. Which includes they've got to be honest, they've got to be transparent with what they're reporting. They can't mislead customers or provide false information, or sort of over exaggerate what they're doing just to sort of try and win work. Um, and once again, as I said, it comes back down to that sort of accountability and financial stability. Part and parcel of what we do is all companies when they first come in, they get audited. Um, and that's sort of really, really important to make sure that these are people who are companies who are within the Property Care Association, the members. They're not these pop-up companies who just sort of jump up, put out a load of bad information and sort of try and take your money and then disappear a year down the line. So we have sort of quite strict procedures, and sort of probably accountability is the most important thing, which we would expect.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes sense. So the consumer, they're getting sort of an extra layer of protection for themselves, if they are working with somebody who is a PCA accredited provider. And so obviously for us personally, we deal with the INS, invasive weeds. So if I could just ask, sort of in that vein, what is it that the PCA is looking for in a knotweed contractor in order to approve them as a PCA member? So I know you said that there's an audit process. So you know, and you're sort of looking to make sure that they're credible and they're not just going to disappear. But
Mhm.
what is it that you're looking for in a knotweed contractor?
Okay. So if a new company wants to come in as a member, there's a two-part process which they have to go through, first of all. The first is that the financial checks, which we already discussed. So they've got to be trading for at least 2 years. They've got to be financially stable for at least 2 years. So they've got to be in the black, sort of as we say. Um, and then beyond that, they have an initial desk assessment. So they will send reports into us where we can sort of physically check, make sure that any reports are up to the standard which we would expect. All of this is highlighted within our code of practice, within our exemplar report, which the support we provide to people. Um, and sort of once we've sort of gone through that initial process, then they'll have a full in-depth technical audit, which then would involve myself or one of our regional support officers, depending on where they are within the country. We will actually attend site. So we'll go to the head office or wherever one of their main offices are. We will check all of their procedures, so their health and safety policies, employee contracts, basic things like cost assessments. I say basic, it's not basic, but actually it's checking the nitty gritty type stuff, making sure that everything is correct and in place. We'll go through and check chemical stores. Obviously, as part of invasive non-native plant remediation, chemicals is probably one of the key tools which we have in our arsenal. So we'll check the chemical stores. Beyond that, we then go out onto site with them, and this has to be an active site, so it's not something which they've done a couple of years ago and there's nothing for us to see. So we want to turn up onto a construction site where they're digging knotweed out or digging whatever invasive plant out. We want to see them go in and conducting a herbicide visit if that's what they're doing. So it's that real nitty gritty stuff which we want to see, because once again, kind of we want to make sure that everyone who comes into membership can hold their own and kind of really knows their stuff. Because if we was to allow companies like that into it reduces the branding worth of the PCA, and actually, once again, any members who come in, that we've got to make sure that they're held accountable. Every company sort of within the PCA have to have a qualified surveyor. So obviously different sectors have different qualifications, but regards to the invasive weeds, any knotweed company or invasive weed company has to have a certified surveyor in Japanese knotweed or CSJK. That's actually sort
Yeah.
of one of our benchmark criterias, which these companies have to have.
So you're really setting quite a high standard with
Yeah.
those checks, and making sure that everybody who is in the PCA is all adhering to those standards, so that you know the reputation of the organization is sound, and so that the consumers can be confident that they are going to be working with somebody who is a high standard.
Yeah, and these standards sort of don't just stop at the initial sort of entry into the PCA. So every member has to go for a biannual audit. So we come out every 2 years, and it's the same process again. Sort of we would check the nitty gritty, we'll check reports, make sure that everything is correct and that they are sort of adhering to the code of practices, everything from sort of writing styles to whether legislation is up to correct or whether monitoring periods for different invasive plants are being adhered to. We'll then, once again, as I said, go back onto site with them. We'll check all their stores and their health and safety policies and their operating procedures. So it's an ongoing process until the company decides they no longer want a PCA member, want to be a PCA member.
That sounds like it would be a bad decision. But yeah, I mean, you speak about this sort of like the ongoing relationship where, you know, the kind of the quality and status is maintained, which is brilliant. But what sort of guidance does the PCA provide to, you know, the knotweed contractor members, you know, to sort of help keep that quality high?
Yeah. So, in regards to technical documents, we kind of have two separate layers. We have our code of practices. So we have one for specifically for Japanese knotweed, which was created many moons ago when the industry sort of first started. But actually, as the industry has evolved, we've now created a invasive non-native plant code of practice, which is a little bit more broader, because companies like yourselves and other members are not just dealing with Japanese knotweed. There's a broad spectrum of plants. And these code of practices really outline the minimum standards of what we would expect a contractor to adhere to. Beyond the code of practices, we have guidance documents, which once again kind of are guidance notes what we would expect members to be doing. However, kind of they are a little bit more less official. So our latest document, which we've just released, is a guidance note on the safe use transportation of herbicides. As we said, herbicides is a key tool within our arsenal, and ensuring that members are kept up to date on legislation, ensuring that members are aware of sort of everything to do with these processes is key. And we completely understand that, especially sort of within the busy periods, it can be hard to keep track on changing legislation and updates of best practices. And this is sort of what we do. We're here to sort of collate that information and give it to all of our members to make sure that they are kept up to date. And there are ways which we can keep people up to date as well. So we have 2 sector meetings a year, exclusive to our members, which once again, all of our members are allowed to attend, where we discuss ongoing situations within the industry. And in these meetings, I'm held accountable to the actions which I do. I have to make sure that I am acting in good faith and doing the right things for you as companies. But also on the same side, we get to discuss our priorities on what companies want the PCA to do.
So
We have
it's
weekly,
quite a symbiotic sort of relationship at that point, where
yeah,
there's a bit of back and forward between the companies and the PCA.
exactly, yeah. I mean, sort of everything which we do is trying to be in best interest for all of the companies. So the more companies which get involved, and the more voices which we have sort of in these types of meetings, the more sort of transparent we can be, and the more we can make sure the industry is going within the right direction. But as I said, sort of it's not just these meetings, it's not 2 meetings a year and that's it. Actually, we have weekly newsletters which we send out to sort of all of our members, which sort of gives an update of what we're doing, whether there's anything new coming up within the industry. So, for example, there has been a government consultation on landfill tax. And we've done an initial response. We put it into our newsletters, and it's up to members to then once again come back to us and say, yes, we support this, no, we don't, and then we can sort of once again rewrite our response to ensure that every voice is being heard.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, that's really a win-win, both for the organizations and for the consumers, because if everybody is being kept up to date and everybody is being brought up to the same position, then obviously all of that relevant legislation and all of those, you know, relevant sort of perks and things that people can take advantage of, all the knotweed contractors are going to know about that, and that can of course be passed on in the work that they do and the relationships that they have with their consumers. It sounds really proactive. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And sort of actually sort of one other thing, sort of we also have our international invasive weed conference, which typically runs in November, and this is sort of a fantastic opportunity because we actually have representatives from people within Europe. We've had people from America come in previous years, and sort of we get to see new and exciting ideas. For example, we've had drone technology being able to sort of go out and identify invasive non-native plants. We've had sniffer dogs, once again, being able to identify Japanese knotweed within the ground, which is a limitation of a normal surveyor. We can only see the aerial growth, but what and this is sort of the type of stuff which we showcase at this conference, and it's a fantastic opportunity to engage with other members, or sort of other stakeholders who are there. So kind of there's a lot which we try and give out, to members and to the wider community as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, I've been looking into the drone surveys and things recently. They seem fascinating, utilizing artificial intelligence as well to help identify those kind of growth areas and growth patterns of different invasives. So I can see that that's really quite interesting as well. So it's not just about, what the current best practices are. It's also about, where are things going, and keeping everybody abreast of the latest technologies as well. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
On that note, actually, I wanted to ask if you saw any sort of major changes in how invasive weeds should be controlled in the future, or if there are any bigger trends, in terms of I guess the way that invasive weeds are changing and adapting, with kind of external factors. We talk a lot about like global warming and things like that, and how that might have an impact on invasives, because they are, of course, a lot hardier than some other native species, when facing these conditions. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that as well.
So actually, that's a really interesting conversation to dive into. Obviously, with the concerns of glyphosate, sort of potentially sort of being banned or its restricted use.
A hot topic, that one, as well. That may be something we need to have another chat. I might have to bring you back for that one as well.
Yeah. But actually, that's where sort of the ideas of other remediation methods sort of really need to come into our forefront. The likelihood of, in my opinion, of glyphosate being completely banned kind of is probably relatively quite low. But actually, I don't think it doesn't change the situation which we're in. And if we was to remove glyphosate or herbicides as one of our key tools, invasive plants are still there, and we still have a problem. So we have to be able to adapt and sort of change our remediation styles. With that in mind, there are a few methods out there which have been trialed. For example, the use of electricity sort of on some invasive non-native plants sort of has been thrown about. Unfortunately, kind of what we're seeing at this point in time is there's no longevity and there's no real evidence that other remediation strategies are really working on invasive non-native plants, because as you said, they are a little bit more hardier than your sort of traditional plants. We did have a discussion a couple of years ago at the conference with a Dutch company who is doing some type of soil sterilization, and sort of which remediates Japanese knotweed within the soil. And as far as I'm aware, kind of there are continued studies which are going to be happening this year. But actually, the evidence looks like it could be really, really good. And this is the type of R&D stuff which kind of maybe as an industry we need to talk about more, and we need to sort of really look at these other things, because we've got to be more sustainable. We can't just throw everything to landfill. If we lose glyphosate, we're just going to dig and dump and put everything to landfill, because it's not sustainable. So we've got to try and find other ways. I think sort of what's going to be quite interesting, sort of over the next sort of year or sort of couple of years, is sort of the landowner responsibility. We are seeing an increase in concerns with invasive bamboos, for example. And actually, it's the necessity for landowners to take more responsibility of these invasive non-native plants. Traditionally, we have Japanese knotweed, who has always been an issue. But actually, if we look at some of the seeding plants like Himalayan balsam, giant hogweed, and if they are in catchment areas or near waterways, streams, rivers, it can cause absolute havoc when the seeds get into the waterways and they go downstream. It's that landowner responsibility, which I think is probably going to be sort of a big issue, or be a big trend within the next sort of couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well because it goes beyond the sort of, I guess, the commercial aspect, and it starts looking more at the environmental impact and the shared responsibility that we have, not just, as businesses or consumers, but more as just like individuals,
Mm.
to help protect, our native species and our environment from these. As you said, they can cause quite some havoc, these invasive species. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective, and I would love to see how that evolves, in as you said, in the next couple of years. So just lastly, just out of curiosity, we often throw these things around. Um, I just wondered, like, if you had to pick one, what would you say is your like favorite invasive? What is the most interesting one? Because they all have some, some unique properties, which while we of course tackle, um, they are quite marvels of nature in a way, in how resilient some of them can be, or how interesting they are. Do you have one that you find the most interesting or the most prevalent?
I'm I'm gonna give you a bit of a split answer for this. So I have three in my head. So for me, I love, or hate, whatever term you want to use.
Love to hate.
Love to hate American skunk cabbage.
Yeah.
It's a lovely looking plant. It looks absolutely amazing, and the way it spreads, it's just a real interesting one. A second one kind of would be Spanish bluebells. Once again, because they are, it's exactly what an invasive non-native plant is. We have our traditional English bluebells, and the Spanish bluebells are kind of the same, just on steroids. They're bigger, they're stronger, than our natives, and it kind of really encapsulates what, an invasive non-native plant is. But it may sound a little bit cliche, but if I'm going to probably say my number one is Japanese knotweed. There are several reasons why for it, though. Um, a Not necessarily because I'm an admirer of it, but actually, it's the plant which is the poster boy. It's sort of changed an industry, but actually, it's very, um, misidentified. Not so much misidentified. It's misunderstood, um, because we go online, we see social media stuff, and if you was to type in Japanese knotweed on Facebook, kind of all this big bad stories come out about knotweed. And actually, sort of being within the industry on a hands-on person, sort of before my role within the PCA, kind of there are so many stories which are just not true. So it's that misunderstanding and misinformation behind it. You ask most people within the knotweed industry, kind of, we're not scared of it, and I understand maybe that's because we deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But actually, kind of, it's just a very misunderstood plant, and I think for me, that's probably why. But not only that, it was the plant which brought me into the industry in the first place. Without this plant in particular, I wouldn't be in my position where I am now. And probably yourself, and your company and all our invasive weed members, we wouldn't be here without Japanese knotweed. So I think sort of my admiration does have to go to knotweed, probably still as my number one, but American skunk cabbage and Spanish bluebells are very,
They're up
very
there.
close. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the really interesting things about some of these invasives, is that many of them were brought over, as ornamental plants, and they were brought over for their quality or for their beauty, and a lot of them were brought over, of course, back in the day when we didn't really understand as well, biosecurity and biodiversity and things like that. And yeah, of course, they've got out of hand now, but they do have a lot of, a lot going for them. Um, I think mine would have to be Himalayan balsam, like anything with exploding seed pods. I think is mine. But no, that's been brilliant. Like we've covered a lot here, and it's been really, really interesting information. So I suppose, like, if I could just say then, if you wanted to give sort of one key takeaway from this for people, about the PCA and its role, what would you leave them with?
I think sort of the takeaway point for me has really got to be, as I said, that accountability. The PCA, we hold our members to account of what they should and shouldn't be doing. I'm held account to the work which I do on behalf of our members, and we hold other people account for other stakeholders, whether we're working with, I said, DEFRA, the Non-Native Species Secretariat, or no matter who we work with, we keep people accountable to make sure that actually invasive non-native plants, are not, people are not spreading lies about this plant, and they're not sort of over creating unnecessary fear. But actually, we need to be proactive, and we need to make sure that when these things happen, we've got to jump on board straight away. So, yeah, that key point of making sure everyone is accountable for their actions is probably my key takeaway point.
Absolutely. So no cowboys, no snake oil salesmen,
Exactly.
just honest, accountable work. I
Yeah.
love that. Thank you so much, Daniel. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today, and I look forward to speaking with you again on another interesting and exciting topic another time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.